Meteorologist Nick Allard.
It is mostly sunny and 55 degrees in downtown Seattle. I'm Ursula Royteen.
From Tacoma to the top of the Space Needle, this is KIRO Radio 97.3 FM. News and talk, powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Big Lead is brought to you by 3010 Weight Loss for Life.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio and streaming on Facebook Live. Welcome to The Big Show. And, I'm looking forward to talking to my guest coming up at 12:30 this afternoon. If you were listening yesterday, you heard about a incident that happened a little over a week ago down in White Center, where a 35-year-old man, about 2:30 in the morning, he heard a window shatter and somebody had broken into his house.
Can you hear how many people are there?
The man is whispering in the closet, holding his gun, the homeowner, while he's talking to the 911 call taker.
Okay. Can you still hear them? Okay, is your door locked?
And then absolute chaos. The 911 call taker, everybody was remarking about her incredible poise. She kept the man so calm. And she'd only been on the job for 3 weeks. Coming up at 12:30 this afternoon, I'm going to talk with that 911 call taker, Zoe Birkbeck, about the experience of taking a call like that in one of her first weeks on the job. So we will have that conversation with her coming up in about 24 minutes here on the Dori Monson Show. But we have a lot of other news to talk about between now and then. Let's get right to The Big Lead.
The Big Lead. I sense a Dori rant coming on.
As if we needed more proof of the absolute insanity of the Seattle City Council, I do have more for you today. They have just passed a new law in Seattle that will require bars, restaurants, gyms, stadiums, and other places of public accommodation to turn closed captioning on television sets. I know you're thinking, wait a second, we've got heroin all over the streets. We've got drug vagrants who have come in from all around the country. We have the worst property crime of any major city in the country. And we are actually caring about closed captioning on televisions in bars? Lisa Herbold, she's the grandma with the nose ring. She's the one who introduced this. Because the way it is right now, if you are hearing impaired, if you go up to a proprietor in a bar or a restaurant or a gym, and you ask them to turn on the closed captioning, they have to do so. But you have to ask them. The fact of the matter is, in most bars, you cannot hear the TV. And so people who are hearing impaired are in the same situation as every other person in that bar, in that they're just watching a ball game. Now, the closed captioning, it obscures, in many cases, much of the lower third of the screen. So if you're trying to watch a ball game, it's unbelievably annoying to have closed captioning on. And the fact that we've already had a rule in town that says if somebody asks you to turn it on, you got to turn it on. And the Seattle Times had a big, long write-up about this. It is like a story, not because of the Times, but because of the city council and the people who are quoting this. It's like a story from The Onion. We have devolved into such comedic insanity here in Seattle. The new legislation, which Mayor Jenny Durkin signed last week and will take effect now in May, it goes further than somebody has to ask them to turn it on. Lisa Herbold said, it's important to shift the onus from having to request closed captions and to instead create the expectation that folks have it in advance. Why is that important? There are people saying, oh, you're not hearing impaired. You don't know. I'm telling you, most bars don't have the sound on. A lot of bars have 3 or 4 different ball games on. In the restaurant, like any hearing impaired person, I can look at the screen and see what's going on. And it is mostly ball games. And the closed captioning is extremely annoying when you're trying to watch a ball game. But Eric Shear, a member of the deaf community, co-chair of a commission for people with disabilities, he said that he now wants to push for this as a statewide law. He said that he's had employees at restaurants decline his requests for captions in the past. Well, then punish them because they're in violation of the law. But don't impose this on everybody in the city. And, as I said, they want to make this statewide. There's one bar that they quote where they have soccer games on, but they also have music playing in this bar in Ballard. And he says, the owner of that bar says he will support this. But he says, it doesn't seem fair to rely on someone asking us to turn on the closed captioning. Again, why is that not fair? Are we that helpless in our society? Are we that incapable of human interaction that government has to mandate it? We can't just have somebody say, hey, I'm hearing impaired, will you turn on the CC? No. We have to have government mandate it. Oh, and how much is this going to cost you and me? Believe it or not, it's going to cost us probably well upwards of 6 figures. And that's because, and this is where it really gets crazy. The law includes a section requesting that this new office study the race and social justice impacts of the requirement to turn on closed captioning. This has become de rigueur in Seattle. Every single piece of legislation, they just throw in random word salad things, and they toss in race and social justice in everything. Now, how does that apply to turning closed captioning on televisions? Well, they said that this new law may be a hardship on immigrant or refugee-run businesses who don't know how to turn the closed captioning on their TV. And they said that they may require additional technical assistance. And that's why they are likely, the Seattle Office of Civil Rights is going to enforce this. They said the enforcement may necessitate them adding an employee. So this is where it's going to get way above 6 figures for taxpayers. They're going to hire a person. How would you like this to be your gig? How meaningless is your life if you're the person who has to go to bars to make sure they've turned the closed captioning on the TVs? What a fantastic way to earn a paycheck there. But they say they may have to add a full-time employee to enforce this, and that the initial work of educating people will be another $25,000 to $50,000. Then they're going to have to spend money for the race and social justice impacts of the difficulty of turning on closed captioning for immigrant and refugee-run businesses. It is truly bizarro world. This is as crazy as it gets. The nanny state, alive and sick here in the Puget Sound area. Up next in the Big Lead.
The Big Lead, Big Local.
The crane collapse last weekend was obviously such a tragedy, but the more information that's coming in, the more it appears to be completely preventable. A listener tipped me off to some guy who has a YouTube channel, and he, with available video and still photos of the crane collapse accident in downtown Seattle this weekend, he gave a brilliant analysis that now the investigators are agreeing with. But he came out with this a couple of days ago. He has a YouTube channel, just says AVE, A-V-E. But as of midnight last night, when I was watching this guy's, it's about 11, 12, 13 minutes, again, just using available video and stills, he gave a brilliant analysis, and he was circling where, as you assemble these cranes, they have pins that are designed to have a strength 10 times greater than would be necessary. So in other words, if the pin were to be a stress point and it could break away at, X number of pounds of pressure, it's designed to handle 10 times that load. So in other words, if the pins are in and this crane is assembled correctly or being disassembled correctly, in this case, he contends there's no way this crane would have come down. And now, as I said, investigators, after a couple of days, have come along. But this is an example of how alternative media and news is many times, so much more insightful. They can move quicker than mainstream sources. And that's why I try to share with you as often as possible. Guys like this, who said the failure on the crane was quite obvious.
I'll demonstrate to you. It could have very easily been avoided. There's a couple smoking guns, what I found, and it ain't pretty.
And then he pointed to places where the crane had separated.
And this is very interesting. These two components completely separated. You'll note there is no buckling in any of these members. And the cab, which isn't particularly heavyweight, has completely separated from the rest of the structure. No buckling is visible.
So let me explain what that means. That if there was buckling, that means the pins were in, they're holding, and it's the metal on the crane that is buckling and snapping for it to come down in three pieces. But there's no evidence of any buckling in the metal on the crane. It looks like these pins that were supposed to hold everything together just weren't there. And so it was just gravity that took down these pieces because the crane, it just slipped apart, the great, huge pieces.
If there were pins as big around as your bicep in that, this would be completely mangled.
And this analyst on the web, and again, I knew about this yesterday, but now the investigators are coming out, and I didn't know the credibility of this guy on YouTube. But now the investigators have come out and said the exact same thing. Associated Press today, missing pins probably caused Seattle crane collapse. Now, again, this is something that internet sleuths knew a couple of days ago. And this guy, again, pointed to the fact that the metal wasn't mangled. It had simply separated at the joints where these pins were supposed to hold everything together.
They'll have a hydraulic section that walks up and down and inserts these sections into, and they all get pinned into place. But you see what's going on here. This is not mangled at all where it's broken. This is not mangled at all. This, not mangled. Not mangled. Even where it fell clean off, not mangled. Now this picture pretty much says it. It's a travesty is what it is.
And he's circling the pinholes on the stills and on the video. And this guy, and now the investigators, days later, are seeming to be going down the same path. that someone probably took a shortcut in disassembling that crane.
The safety rules that are in place are all written in blood. And you're working for a good, strong union like the iron workers, there's no excuse for taking a shortcut. Why they would pull the pins out prior to having it rigged up, or even maybe there was a situation with the crane was rigged up, but it was too windy and he had to call it off or whatever. But still, you should have put the pins back in. And the other thing is, why did they take all of the pins out? You generally, prudence, the safety goat dictates, you would pull the pins out of one section at a time, not work from the bottom up. That's kind of lazy, is it not? You pull all the pins so that you don't have to them later, climbing up and down. I don't know. That's just my cursory look at this. Pretty obvious, major up.
It is another example, though, of how there's a lot of information out there, alternative sources that tend to be very, very insightful. And when you see the photographs of those cars that were smashed, when you think about the tons of steel that came down on the roofs of these cars, and you think about those 4 people whose lives were lost, if that happened because of some shortcut, because of some laziness, because they wanted to hurry to the next gig, I don't know. But in this Associated Press story, they talked to a crane accident investigator who said if the pins had been in, that crane would not have fallen over. 250,000 people, more than, that was as of midnight last night, had seen the video that I just shared the audio with you of. There are people out there who are seemingly watching out for us, even better than a lot of people in government and private industry. And that's where this is such a horrible tragedy. If this was a shortcut that took those 4 beautiful lives, what an absolute sick tragedy that is. And that is your big lead for today.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
Ursula's going to check the news, and then a conversation you are not going to want to miss. The 911 call taker who had to deal with a homeowner killing an intruder. We will talk with her next here on the Dori Monson Show.